Today on Sola Outdoors, I built a bed rack and it turns out quite fine. All right, so today I want to bring y'all in on a little secret. You don't have to spend a bunch of money to have really cool overlanding gear. So our plans for the Overland Ranger is to have a rooftop tent, and I don't want to spend the money on buying a roof rack for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I go through the process of designing and fabbing up a half rack for the truck. First things first, you want to have a design in mind. So the design on mine is super simple. It's just a regular 4-post bed rack about the same width as the bed rails. It's really basic, super basic, something that you don't really need a lot of specialty tools to accomplish. As long as it mounts okay and holds my rooftop tent, I'm happy. I went ahead and added a crossbar between the 4 posts, not only to add a little bit of rigidity, but give us a mounting point for any sort of recovery gear, roto packs, whatever you feel like mounting on here. So that's pretty much the basic idea of what I'm looking for in this rack. I went ahead and drew it on the computer in CAD just to kind of get a better idea of what angles, what lengths, how much material I'm gonna need, but you really don't have to do that. You can do it all on pen and paper. It's just gonna take you a little bit more time. Now, whenever you go to get your angle set up to match the lines of your truck, I highly recommend you go and pick up one of these angle finders from the store. Trust me, it will save you a bunch of time and at least a couple of tools from getting thrown across the shop. So once you know how much metal you need, you got to get it from somewhere. We ended up having to go to metalsdepot.com to get ours, but if you've got a local metal yard, go to them first. They could probably cut you a good deal. When you go to pick out your metal, you don't have to get the strongest available. We're only using 14 gauge for ours because it's both strong and mostly lightweight. It's only 1/8 inch wall steel. Should do plenty fine for overlanding. So I highly recommend making yourself a cheat sheet of what all parts you have to make. I've got on here the number of parts, the lengths, the angles I need to cut, and as I go along, I'm just crossing them off so I'll never forget what I'm doing. Okay, it is day 2. No, I didn't get a haircut. I got them all cut. So we've got both of our main hoops tacked in place, mocked it up on the truck. Looks like it's gonna fit. Oh, so nice. That means we can go ahead and weld them in place as they are, but first we need to measure and cut the little cross beam that we're gonna put between the two, get them spaced out, get it nice and square. I've already made the brackets for the rooftop tent to mount to the rack. All I did was cut it out with a plasma cutter, cleaned it up on the bench sander, and then beat it into shape using a hammer. I really wish I had a metal brake for this. That would have made the job so much easier, and these brackets would have came out much prettier. Beggars can't be choosers. So what I'm doing here is measuring our center line so that I can measure from the middle of the beam, not from, what's 49 3/4 divided by 2? That's 24 7/8. Double check. So if it's 24 7/8, yeah, math, look at that. I got an engineering degree for a reason. Wasn't this? All right, so the center line we're going to use to basically measure outwards instead of measuring from the sides. That way, no matter what, the middle of this is the middle of the rack. So the rails on our tent are 32 inches apart, so we're gonna measure 16 inches both ways away from the center line. And that is where the center of our brackets mount. You know, I marked that and then I just remembered I've got to buff or sand that entire thing down so I can actually weld to it. All right, so I've finished prettying up the welds. If you're a better welder than me, you probably won't have to spend the 6 hours that I did grinding everything to look good. So my plan to mount this rack is actually just going to be a piece of flat plate welded to the bottom of the foot on the leg. I'm gonna weld a nut to that plate and then just gonna bolt straight through the bottom. Not looking forward to drilling a hole through the bed, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. So when I am welding hardware to anything, I usually will strip the, there's like a zinc coating, that's why it's so shiny and it doesn't rust. There's a coating on there that you gotta get off before you weld. And if you breathe that in, so while you're welding, it'll let off some fumes. If you breathe that in, it'll make you feel real sick. Also, it doesn't give you a very good weld. So always clean your hardware before you start welding. So I'm using a bolt to hold the nut in place. So that way I know for a fact I can get the bolt in there after it's welded in. All right, so I've got it tacked in place. I'm not gonna fully weld it. I find that when I do that, it usually warps the threads. It doesn't let the bolt go in quite as smoothly. And plus, if you sink too much heat into it, you actually will change the metal structure in it and generally make an inherently weaker part. So while I'm down here, if you wanna make sure that your welds are good, just look at the back side of them. If you've got discoloration, like a good heat spread, then your weld should be stout enough for what we're doing here. You're not gonna pass a weld test doing this, but it'll pass a sniff test. I've got two smaller heat patches there. Those welds probably aren't gonna stick nearly as well, but I'm confident that those two will do just fine, and it's good enough for what we're doing here. It's still very hot and I can't pick it up. That's not gonna help. Sharpie corpy. That's still hot. So those mounts aren't gonna work. I went to go do a test fit. Turns out there's actually a second wall of the bed, kind of blocks the place where the bolt was gonna fall. So just whipped up a couple of little brackets here, drilled some holes in them, and I think actually this might work better than the original plan. You can actually see the two mounting holes and mark it with a pin while it's mocked up. Should be a lot easier, take the guesswork out of mounting this thing to the bed. But it's basically done. It's welded up. We're past mock-up stage. It is time to finish the project. As you can tell, I got my shop Crocs on, which means it's time to paint, which means you can't be in here. You got a nice camera. So, go on. Get out! Bed rack is on, painted, and mounted. Two of those are the same thing. Doesn't matter. I'm excited. I love this thing. It is cool. I'm so happy to have a truck. What was I saying? So it's all wired up, at least on the top part. Still need to wire it inside the bed. I've got plans for that. Slapped a bed cover on it. Nothing fancy. It's just an Amazon special, but needed something to cover the stuff in the bed, which I think next thing I'm going to tackle is an organization system. So if you want to watch me struggle with that, be sure to subscribe. So there you have it. In 3 to 5 business weekends, you can have your very own DIY homebrew bed rack, and it will look just as okay as all the other aftermarket ones. But that's pretty much all I got for this one. So thanks for sticking with me, and I'll catch y'all next time.